Hi everybody, in this video, we're going to learn about emojis, not what they are, you probably already know them because you use them all the time, but we're going to look at emojis more from the point of view of a web developer, how to use them in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's going to be a short and fun video, so let's get started. So before we go on, emojis have been around for a very long time, and when I read about this for the first time, I was surprised. It was 1999. NTT Docomo in Japan had emojis in their phones, and they looked kind of like this we're seeing right now. Definitely not as elaborate as the emojis you might have seen in various apps that we use today. For example, let me go to Twitter, and you can see that when I want to add an emoji, we have a lot more icons. You have categories for not just smileys, but animals, food and drink, activity, just a wide assortment of icons that you can use for pretty much any kind of situation that you want. And this list keeps growing. This is 2018 right now, and there's a proposal in place for even more emojis. So it's definitely pretty crazy to see that we started out from just what you see here, which are really a small set of really pixelated looking icons, to ones that are now much more elaborate, and they look kind of nice across a variety of screens. All right, so what exactly are emojis though? I kind of mentioned they're visual icons, but what they really are though is they look a little bit like images, and they maybe even behave like images, but they're actually more like characters. They're more like letters, numbers, and punctuation marks and weird symbols that we tend to bucket as text. And that's an important detail to know because the way we treat text is very different than how we treat images, and the places we can use text are also very different and probably more expansive as well. And so we'll see some of that as part of using them in our app. So there's a lot of research on emojis, a lot of documentation, a lot of really technical articles on what they are. But for now, just remember these three things. They're just characters. You can select them, copy them, paste them, adjust their size, and so on. And the third part is a little bit more subtle that we'll get to when we look at the code, is they have more primitive numerical representation. And this representation you can use to get them to display as the visual things we see on screen. And so, we can spend more time talking about them, but really, there's no fun in that. Instead, let's just go ahead and dive in and start using emojis in our application. So here I have a very simple code pen that I've started, and there's something really crazy going on here, and you can follow along if you want to, but you look at the code. We have a blank HTML page, and we have some sample content. This emoji example, which is the heading 1 tag, a couple of p tags that say emojis are pretty awesome. Here's an example. And then an h4 tag, which contains the actual emoji we're displaying, in which case right now it's just a very simple character, text character with just a smiley face in it. Let me zoom in just a little bit more so you can see it more clearly. In fact, let me make this smaller and make the text code a little bigger so you can see it without having to squint too much, especially if you're on a small phone. So what we're going to do is look at all the various tricks we have for using emojis by fiddling with what we can see here in this very simple example. So to use emojis, there's just two things you need to keep in mind. One is you can use them directly, and that's the easy approach we're going to look at in a few moments. Or you can specify their Unicode endpoint or code point, and we'll look at what that means as well. So let's go and get started. So here I have the emoji example that we looked at earlier. And right now the emoji we have, the little smiley face right here, is nothing fancy. It's literally just some text that is the colon, the P sign, or the classic smiley with the tongue sticking out. So nothing too interesting there. So what we're going to do is insert an emoji to actually be something more interesting. Now, there are many ways of being able to do this, but what you really need is a location where you can both find emojis and copy them in their very raw character text-based form. You don't want the image versions of it. There are many places you can go, but my favorite is a place called Emojipedia. And Emojipedia is essentially, think of it as like the Wikipedia for everything related to emojis. So I'm going to search for, in this case, basically hamburger. And once I've done that, you'll see a variety of things that relate to hamburger, in this case flag for Hamburg or hamburger itself. I'm going to click on this link. And once you've seen that, you'll see that you get a detailed page for everything pertaining to the hamburger emoji, which includes like what they look like on multiple platforms and so on. But the part that we want to focus on primarily is this place right here, where it says a copy button and the version of the emoji in text-based form, where I can just select and copy if I want to. So I'm going to go and copy this. So what we've done is we copied the hamburger emoji. And if I want to use it in my document, the easiest way is to, once I've copied representation of this emoji, I just paste it anywhere in my code editor. So right now I have selected my little, primitive text-based version of what could be an emoji one day. And I'm just going to replace it with what it is copied, which is the hamburger. And notice once I've done that, you not only see the hamburger represented in my code editor, which is traditionally a very text-based environment, so it's pretty trippy if it's the first time you're seeing it, but you can also see it rendered live in the preview when you see it in the browser as well. So that's pretty neat. And before that though, there's one more thing we need to do. We need to make sure that our pages are rendered in UTF-8 encoding. Now, for the most part, this is often taken care of automatically for you, but you definitely want to make sure, because if you use some other encoding, the emojis will not look right. So the way you specify that is you, anywhere in your head tag, add a meta tag with the car set attribute set to UTF-8. And in our case, the emoji is still displayed, but doing this does help because it ensures that we can avoid any situations where, let's say you're in a system somewhere in the middle of the world where the default encoding is not set to UTF-8. This will ensure that there's no discrepancy there. It's going to be pretty consistent. So pretty neat. So here's how we use the version of the emoji in HTML using it directly. But we also talked about another approach. We can also use an approach which is known as the code point. We'll talk more about code points in a little bit. But if you look at an emoji, it's available in this visual representation, but there's a more numerical representation as well. And you can see it right here in Emojipedia, where it has a section called code points, and you can see this U plus 1F354. That is known as a code point, and this is an alternate way for you to represent emoji if for whatever reason you can't use them directly in a visual form. And so in HTML, the way you deal with that is you replace the words, we saw the 1F354, I'm going to replace all of that by just typing in first the ampersand, pound X. This is really weird, I know, but just memorize that as part of the, the U plus becomes the ampersand pound X, and then you do 1F354. This basically tells you, or tells our browser, our rendering engine, that we're dealing with a Unicode character, and then the code point for that in that giant table of characters is just F354 or 1F354, and now you can see that we have the hamburger emoji rendered directly, not as the bizarre characters you see on screen, but as its more visual representation. And likewise, you're not limited to using emojis just in HTML. You can use them in CSS as well. So let me go ahead and go to my CSS, and let's go ahead and, for example, let's say we want to use the same emoji in the heading 1 tag and have it display just before it. So I'm going to type in heading 1 before, use the pseudo selector for that, content, and just paste in the emoji like I had before. And notice that in CSS, I can paste it in directly, but just like we can use the direct approach or the non-direct approach, you can still go ahead and use the approach where you can basically use the code point. And in that case, the only frustrating part is that you think about to learn how to use them in HTML with the Unicode character, but it's going to be different in CSS. It's a funny little formatting. So it starts off with quotation mark /01F354. End result is still the same thing. You're now going to see the emoji appearing here as expected, but the only difference is that instead of seeing it visually, you're seeing it using the code point approach. So that's how you use emojis in HTML and CSS. But before we go, we JavaScript, got to talk about that because, well, how many apps do we build these days that don't have anything to do with JavaScript? So let's go ahead and just wrap things up by looking at how to do this in JavaScript as well. I'm going to go and change what I have here back to the smiley with the tongue sticking out. And now let's go ahead and do the same exact thing in JavaScript. What we want to do is modify this, insert an emoji where we have the heading element whose ID value is conveniently just emoji. So for this, I'm just going to do var emoji equals, first thing, just normal DOM manipulation, get a reference to this particular element. So document.querySelector and hashtag emoji. So now we have a variable called emoji that's now referencing our heading element. And what we do inside of it is just make sure that emoji.innerText equals, let me just type in hello just to make sure that the code is working as expected. Yep, you can now see hello showing up. So now let's replace it with what we would expect to be the code point value of it instead. And so to insert the code point value, if you thought the approach in HTML and CSS was a little bit bizarre, you have yet another approach using the APIs in JavaScript, and that is the very convenient string.fromCodePoint method. And this method is, as its name implies, takes one argument, and that argument is the code point. So in this case, it's going to be 0x1f354. So notice that in all of these cases, the value 1f354, the values that we see right here as part of the code point, last 5 digits of the code point, they're pretty much the same in all the various settings, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The only variation is what goes in front of it. You have /0 in CSS, you have the U+ in the more native approach right here, you have that weird syntax in HTML with the pound key and all of that, and in JavaScript we have the 0x. So those are the 3 approaches you have for being able to specify the emoji. Oh, we forgot the most important part of it as well. In JavaScript, you can always insert the string, the emoji, as text as well. The only thing you got to make sure is, instead of just pasting it directly as an emoji character, it is a string after all, so you need to wrap it in quotation marks. If you forget to do that, it won't exactly work. But in this case, I did it, and you can now see the hamburger appearing visually as well. We almost forgot about that one, so good thing that we now saw all approaches. So basically we saw 6 approaches, 2 approaches for HTML, the visual and the non-visual approach, the 2 approaches in CSS, same style, and then 2 approaches in JavaScript, again, non-visual and a visual approach as well. So that's really all there is to using emojis in our web applications. Nothing too complicated going on here. But before we wrap up though, I just want to touch base on a few little things about emojis that you may find interesting. Some more emoji stuff. So what we see as emojis, right? The reason why we have all these weird representations and weird copies of how to insert them is that what our keyboards allow us to represent, the characters that we can use, all the letters and numbers and symbols we see there, is a very tiny percentage of the overall set of characters that's actually available to us to use, which is because we saw a variation of this on the Twitter emoji selector, but you actually have in all of our operating systems you have a version of it. You have the character map in Windows, it's a very classic UI, and on the Mac you have the character viewer, which allows you to kind of go beyond what our keyboards allow you to have access to, which is a large category of not just emojis but also arrows, bullet stars, currency symbols. If you've ever seen those weird Latin characters like the Greek symbols like pi and theta and things like that, they're all characters that we have access to as part of whatever language we're on. It's just that our keyboards can represent them, so we never treat them that way directly. So you have alternate mechanisms for being able to insert them. And the thing is, this unique numerical representation is not just specific to emojis. We saw that they had that. It turns out that all the characters we use, even our normal letters, they have the same bizarre numerical representation under the covers as well. And here's the thing. Let's say we see A, B, C, D, E, F, G on screen, right? This normal characters that you see all the time. If you had to look at this numerical representation, this is actually what they look like. Our system does not see them probably as letters. They actually interpret things in this same bizarre numerical representation. And so all the characters we have are kind of in this bizarre approach, which is kind of mind-blowing if you ever actually thought about it, because we just think we're typing in characters, but you dig one layer below on what we see. Everything that we see is this like real, machine code like language. And there's a name for these, and that is the Unicode code point. So we've seen the term code point a few times already. The word Unicode might be the new part in it. So Unicode is really this major standard that a lot of these characters adhere to, and it really ensures that a letter A, for example, on my machine is the same as viewed on another machine or a device in a different language, different locale, in a different part of the world, where they might have a different way of representing content completely, but in making sure it follows the Unicode standard, I can ensure some form of consistency. So that's Unicode. And the code point, think of it as like an index value for an array. The Unicode table is massive, has a lot of values in it. The code point kind of allows you to pick where in the table you're going to look at for all the characters. So a code point is the most basic unit of representing information in Unicode, and a series of code points represents characters and text. So, for example, the letters you're seeing on my screen right now are made up of probably dozens or at least a handful of code points for each variation that you can see. So there you have it, a very quick overview of how to use emojis on your web documents in your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we kind of took a quick detour and just looked behind the scenes at what an emoji really is and how it fits in with all the characters that we see there, which is if our keyboards were massive, almost the size of like a really large room, we can imagine that you not only have our normal letters, numbers, and symbols, but also a key for emojis and all the various characters that we kind of looked at as part of just a full Unicode table of content. And so with that, if you have any questions, post in the forums at forum.crypto.com, where I and others would be happy to help you out. And the forums also have a pretty sweet collection of emojis as well. These emojis are image-based to make sure they're consistent across all the various operating systems. So definitely check them out, and I'd love to hear what you think about those. If you like this, tell your friends and enemies all about them. Hit subscribe to be notified of other videos in the series that are related to web development. Follow me at Krupa on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, where I post things that are related to web development that I find interesting. And there are a bunch of books I've written that cover not particularly about emojis, but other interesting topics. If you like the style of me explaining some of these concepts, you'll probably like my books on animation, React, JavaScript, and even the canvas. So check them out. And with that, I will see you guys next time.